Welcome, Dick. Thank you so much for agreeing to talk to us. So Dick and I have known each other for years and years. In fact, we worked together. Gosh, I don't even think I want to know how many years ago
It was
that
a while.
was. Dick and I, it was, don't tell anybody how long ago that was. But when we were first sort of aspiring financial modelers, we worked together as financial analysts. And we've kind of stayed in touch ever since. And I've kind of gone down the really financial modelling route. And Dick has worked more in, you've still been doing a lot of finance stuff, but you've got more into seminars, thought leadership, coaching, and helping people with their career strategy. So I thought that's really relevant. You've still got that sort of finance background as well as a lot of recruitment and executive coaching type experience. So thank you so much for agreeing to talking to us. It's a little bit different to our usual session. We usually get a little bit technical. So I look forward to what you have to share with us.
Okay, cool. Well, thank you. And yes, you don't want me to say exactly how long, eh? Well, actually later.
I was actually pregnant with my first baby.
Yes, I remember. And
yes, just getting his driver's license. So.
And I wasn't actually in finance at the time. I was actually in the business side.
Yes, you were.
So you were doing this fancy stuff with spreadsheets. And I thought, how'd you do that?
Yeah.
And I was thinking, I learned some stuff from the guy who hired me. He was doing fancy stuff. And I thought, how did you do that? So I think a lot of this, we just learn along the way. And then we realize we don't know everything about it. We've got a few more things. All right. So thank you. I thought I'd put our little meetups up here, Danielle's meetup and her book.
Oh yes, you came along to my book launch, didn't you?
I did. Yes, I got a signed copy, and both book launches.
Oh yes, I've had a couple of book launches.
Yeah. So I've actually got I think 7 meetups actually. I think a few entrepreneur ones, some job ones, and
oh yeah, you're like the meetup king. You know all about the meetups, don't you?
Well, I sort of started 3 and then I took over a few, and that was just, but you can't merge them. I've realized I asked them if I could merge them and they couldn't merge them anyway. That's life. But I'm much more impressed by Danielle's book. I actually contribute to a book, but it took me like a few days to write where Danielle wrote a whole textbook. I think I would have killed myself if I'd been forced to write that. Okay, so you want me to start?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, cool. So basically, I'll tell you what I'm going to cover, but I'm going to welcome a lot of questions. So whatever you want to ask, and then you will ask some along the way. And I think we've got some polls. We can, along the way, we can ask some polls.
So just let me know when you want me to launch them. So.
Okay, cool. Well, I'm not that organized in the head, but if you see the opportunity where I've forgotten, maybe gone over it, I've got the list of polls here, but maybe you can start with the first one. Tell us what you are working, are you currently working or not? So that's the first poll that I put up. So tell us about.
That'd be really interesting to know, like whether people are looking for work, whether they're working and looking, or wanting to sort of change careers. So I think that's kind of interesting. Yeah, just give it a minute.
Yeah, so answer that along the way. I'll just cover what I'll talk about. So what I got good at was actually, I feel this is a bad thing to say exactly, but it's like, how do I talk my way into a job? How do I convince people I can do the job? And at times during my career, and this is even before I met you, Danielle, I was going for a job. It was a couple of decades ago. I remember being interviewed originally by the recruiter and then the interviewer. And I felt like it was a new industry. I didn't know, it was telecommunication. I didn't know the jargon, but I just sat down and felt like I taught my way in. And I asked for a lot more money than they actually wanted. The recruiter was trying to convince me not to ask for that much. And I got it, but I did feel like, okay, I felt like there were better people potentially who had more experience, more qualifications. I'm not a CPA or CA or anything like that. I'm more of an analyst. I did some accounting at university the first year, so I'm not even an accountant. So I'm strictly more commercial, but what happened was I learned to communicate what I could do a lot better. So, so what I'll cover is how do you impress people with your ability? And I think in areas such as IT and often finance, people can struggle with that. They tend to be a bit more conservative, a bit more less spoken, less well spoken. So I see some results for the poll. Okay, so not looking for work, not working but looking for work, 26. Okay, good. Not actively looking, 13%. So working. Oh, I'm missing the but. There's a but something in the third one. I assume that's but.
Yep.
But looking. So working in accounting, but wanting. Okay, cool.
So most people are wanting to get into analysis and modeling.
Yeah, and this is good because this is what I found myself. A lot of people, when I've advertised for an accounting for an analyst role, about 70% that apply are accountants who might struggle with Excel. Okay, so what I'll do is I'll talk about what impresses others about your ability. How do you show that you have technical ability? Because the thing about your interview, you're not analyzing spreadsheets or producing reports. So how do you show people that you can do it without actually doing it? Ways that you can look for a role in this area, and how to outshine other candidates. Okay, so I think this is important. This is one thing I got very good at. And how do you show you're ready for the next level? So a lot of people, they might be an analyst for a while. Often the next level could be you may be managed analyst or you FP&A manager, commercial manager, or even you get into like a finance director role. So how do you show that? And also Q&A. Daniel's going to ask me some questions in the end. Just let me know if I'm running slow, Daniel. Just push me along. So what I'll do is I'll cover resumes first. And this is what I often do, but I'll try to adapt it for finance. So you can't see it here, but I'll tell you that if you look up a group called the Ladders, they did something called eye tracking study in 2018. They did one 2 years before. And basically what they found was it takes about 7.4 seconds for a recruiter. And what they did is analyze the eye movements of recruiters on a screen looking at a resume and worked out where the eyes lingered for how long and how long overall did they take to decide if this resume was suitable or not. What they found 2 years ago was a 7.4 seconds. They could decide whether this resume was worth continuing with or next. So as a statistic, roughly about 200, more than 200 applications come in for one online ad usually. On LinkedIn a few years ago, it was about 117. And if you go to Seek or Monster or Indeed, it was over 200. I remember one role that I sat next to this state finance manager and he advertised for a junior accountant. Overnight, he got 250 applications over one night. All right, so there's a lot of things that people have to read through. So if I spend 7.4 seconds, usually they can decide if you're good or not. So bear that in mind. So you've actually got 7.4 seconds to grab their attention. And I think there's a few ways you can grab their attention. All right, so think about a newspaper article or even your Facebook feed. How quickly do you read that before you go next? Because in a newspaper, you don't read all the articles. In a Facebook feed, you sort of scroll through and then you might stop at something. So you only got a short period of time. Usually it's only a few seconds in those instances. They give you 7.4, which is actually increased from the 6 seconds they found in 2016. So I'll show you how to do it. So think about this. This is a little bit of a guide. So we're going to look at, initially this American resumes. American resumes are slightly different from Australian and British resumes. American resumes are shorter, tend to be 1 or 2 pages. In Australia, we tend to go a little bit longer, maybe 3 pages. But you'll see in the darker red spot, that's where it lingers the most. A little bit of yellow, a little bit less in the purple, where the eyes go to. So what they find is, you can see here, the eyes linger along your title, your summary up top, right? So this is like a summary. This is your job description. and maybe the next job description, and over the page, there'll be a little bit more history. You'll see it focuses a lot on what you say about yourself up front, your latest role, but you notice how far it disappears here, right? So if you have anything important to say, anything relevant to say it up front. And I sort of use a rule of 3. So you'll see people write a lot of dot points about what they do. And what happens when you write a lot of dot points is by the 4th dot point, you've almost forgotten what the first one is. So if you're going to be practical, you try not to read too much because you've forgotten the more important stuff. So you actually stop yourself. And when they test people, they find that most people think they can remember like 7 numbers in a row, let's say a sequence of 7. What they do is they can really only remember 3 or 4. If they remember a bit more, they group things together. Okay. So most important thing is, have that title right. They look at the time, how long you stay there, and what you say, and really the first 3 points. Okay. And up here as a summary about yourself. So I want you to focus on these key things. And what they found was the better performing resumes, they had clear, simple title headers, clear, simple title headers. They had readable layouts with bullets, and they had a statement at the top about who you are. And I'm going to go a little bit more about that statement as well. And then here's another type of resume, and this is, let's say, worst performing resume. And what they found was it's cluttered. The sentence structures and not a lot of space. The layout was hard to read. And one thing is they stuffed a lot of keywords in there. Okay. So I get a lot of questions about keyword stuffing. Like people like to stuff keywords. Especially in IT, you can all have all this software. In financial modeling, slightly less, but people can stuff a lot of stuff in. I've done this sort of reporting or this sort of analysis. What happens is they do it to I guess, win the points system that applicant tracking can do. So basically, a computer reads a resume and gives it, let's say, a score. And if it passes a certain amount of a score, they'll pass it on to the recruiter or somebody to actually review it. But in the end, a person actually still has to read the thing. So what I would focus on is actually what happens when a recruiter reads it rather than a computer. So think about that. This is what they found. It does work as well. All right, so I'm going to give you an example. So what I'm going to do is, let's see if I have a poll I forgot to ask. All right. Okay, I have a poll next, but one thing that's really important is, remember how I talked about the first 3 points grab you? What happens is there's a job description and they ask for something. And what I find when I look at resumes is most people make you work to identify if you actually match that or not. So here's a very simple job description in finance. So financial analyst with at least 2 years experience working within the financial services or banking, support business managers in reporting and analysis of their performance KPIs.
We can't really read that.
Okay.
Did you want to share your screen?
Right, what I'll do is I'll find the...
or is it not important that we read it? Oh, that's better.
Can you see it? Oh, okay. What I'll do is I'll find the actual thing. I'll
Maybe share it.
I'll screen share it, yeah. Let me open it up on my other screen. Okay. All right.
And we're going to send these out. Are we going to send this stuff out?
Yeah, I can definitely send it out. Yeah.
People are saying they're able to read it, so maybe don't worry too much.
Yeah, it depends on the size of your screen. But what I'll do is I'll share the screen anyway.
Yeah.
And you'll be able to see it.
All right, that's fine.
Okay. All right. So hopefully you can, oh, sorry, I'm using the wrong clicker now. Okay. All right, so you can see that hopefully. All right, so here's a job description. Proactively identify opportunities and assist in accurate budgeting and forecasting. So if I talk about that part at the top, this is what I often see. This could be the job description. I'm looking for this. So imagine what the actual person is looking for, and they write something like this. And this was actually what somebody wrote I got a resume writer to write something, right? This was quite a few years ago. I actually got a resume writer who'd been doing stuff for like 10 years or more, writing resume for 10 years. And this is what they wrote. I didn't like it, and I'll tell you why, but this is quite typical. A highly motivated, multifaceted, results-driven consultant with over 10 years of corporate experience, rewarded for directing company professional development, work ethic, and personnel administration, and achieving desired levels of growth. The reason I don't
It actually
like...
says multi-faced.
Oh,
so
well, it should be multifaceted. Sorry, I was typing it because it was...
yeah, well, that's even worse, having it. I think if you meant multifaceted and write multi-faced.
That was me typing it, sorry. I was copying it over to here and I must say...
I knew what you meant.
Multifaceted, okay. But this is what they wrote. And I looked at it, and what people won't complain about it. Recruiters won't necessarily say, oh, that's no good. But when I read something like this, and this is a little bit me, and I have sort of tested this to some degree, what they see is they don't know if it's true or not. And also, I can't picture this person easily. And what happens when you can't picture it, you don't remember it. By the time you get to the bottom of the first page, all you know is this guy said he or she was good at stuff.
That's actually a really good point, Dick, making sure that somebody can picture you, sort of giving some idea of your personality is a great tip.
Yes, and this is common. Everyone does this now. It's almost like, I feel like it's become a bit of a disease. People write this sort of fluffy stuff because they think it sounds good. But if you think about, results, if you look at an advertiser or people writing a newspaper article, they don't write stuff like this because people don't actually can't picture it. They can't see the story. So you're actually wasting, let's say, 2 seconds of the 7.4 seconds by writing this. Right? So if I go sort of find something which is a bit of more of a match, that's not a match. So if I do that again, okay, and I write something like this: financial and commercial analyst with 3+ years experience, including banking, with results in business partnering, blah, blah, blah. So that's still a little bit fluffy, right? I would personally improve it, but you can see what I've done, and this is what I found has been successful for me. When I see a job description, and when I've seen a resume which matched my job description, I want to read on. And what I'm doing is I'm trying to find out, I'm just trying to verify now this person's done it. So if you notice the job description, it says 2 years experience working in financial services and banking. I might not have 2 years working in that area, but I say I got 3 years experience, including banking, right? So it's attractive enough to me to interview you and find out more. Now, it may be you had 1 year working there, right? But you've got enough experience, and I feel like it's still sort of a match. Don't feel uncomfortable that everything doesn't match perfectly. Very few people match perfectly. But people who match perfectly, often you can't tell because you've wasted the reader's time, the recruiter or the person reading the resume's time, and they never got to there. So just make sure. I actually, when I talk to a recruiter, sometimes I ask them if they've seen me before about another resume. They'll say, "Oh, I have your resume." I'll ask them, would you like me to tailor the resume more specifically? And sometimes that's that's just moving some points around rather than rewriting the whole thing. You can do it in 15 minutes. But the key thing is I want to make sure that first couple of seconds stands out. And partly the way I learned this was I advertised for a role. I actually was working for a recruitment company at the time, right? So I was actually recruiting myself. I got the HR person who does internal recruiting to send me pretty much most of the resumes. And the resume which stood out matched exactly what I described in my job description, in the order that I actually wrote it in. And that person stood out for me. I interviewed the person, hired them. They did very well. And it was simply because it's a little bit like this. If I ask for something, you give me that thing, I feel I'm happy. If I ask for something, you give me something else, I'll have to ask you again, right? But if I've received 200 and something applications, I'm not going to ask you again, right? Because you should have done it right the first time. So answer what they're looking for. And if you think about how managers talk to recruiters or even talk to internally, they'll say, you know, I'm after this person, this type of person. They should have this many years experience. They need to have done this, done this, done this. And it'd be good if they have this and this and this, right? And if you look at it, that's how a job description is often written. The less important fluffy stuff is down the bottom. It'd be nice if they can communicate well, and they should be able to communicate well. And it'd be advantageous if they knew this sort of, you know, did macros in spreadsheets, blah, 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 right? But the most important stuff is off the top of my head, right? So make sure you can actually give them that. All right, so what have I got next? Oh, wrong slide. Okay. So that's a bit more of a match. Okay, so I'm going to talk about the recruitment cycle.
Thanks, that's great, Dick. So we're about 30 minutes in. So what other things are we going to cover?
Okay,
is there another poll you want me to do?
Yeah, so just ask me some of the questions. Maybe what we'll do is we'll make it interactive.
Yeah, so I think probably the thing that people really want to know is what really, you know, when you get into, you know, if you've managed to get your CV across the line, what is it that really impresses an interviewer? So like when you get in there, what is it that they, you know, sort of things
so,
listen?
All right, so my thought is it's almost like it's a combination of three sort of things. Obviously, we need to know that technically you can do it. Maybe I'll just write this up easier. Oh, I accidentally turned it off. If I can get an idea that you have technical ability, okay. So I think I've got, convince me technically you can do the job.
Yeah, great. So that's, yeah, so sorry, before we jump into that, there was actually a question that I missed, just going back to the resume.
Okay.
There was a question from Aziz saying, what font should you use for body and headline? Should we use header or footer, or should we avoid using? In my opinion, I don't think it really matters what font you use, but just something that is clear and stands out and doesn't try to be too clever or...
Yeah. So I think should be clear.
Fancy. What's your opinion, Dick?
Yeah, there's some studies. I think about it this way, right? A lot of people try to fit as much as possible and you have quite a small font. But remember, some of these guys, if they're fairly senior, they're going to be in their 50s or more. And by that age, often people are short-sighted, right? So if you have such a small font, they can't read it, put in reading glasses. It's a bit of a hassle. I'd rather have more space, find out a way to show space so I can see the headings clearly. They actually did a study on reading and fonts. There's this idea, you know, serif and sans serif. See if I don't have that slide up on here, but serif is like Arial is.
Oh, when you have the curly, basically the curly bits, isn't it? The serif.
Yeah, so Arial is something like this. You know, that's an R, right? But with a serif, that's sans serif without the serif. So they have a wing on it almost like that. So that's, can you see that? All right.
Yeah.
So that's
basically use serif, use sans serif, not serif.
No, actually what they found is comprehension reading speed increases when you have serifs. That actually works better.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I thought it was counterintuitive, but the study showed that works better. So in the body where you got long text, use that one is okay. But the headings, this can be fine as well because it's large enough. But what they find is this actually is faster reading and higher comprehension when you have a serif. So Times New Roman is an example of a serif font. And that's Arial is a sample of a sans serif without serif font. That's curiosity.
Just another question.
Yep.
Sorry, just another question about the CV. Should we use a table in the CV, or should you just have bullet points?
I actually feel a bullet points would be better. And it's only more of a risk thing, right? If you know it's going directly to somebody through their direct email, and they're going to pick it up exactly the same format. Send it in Word, by the way, rather than PDF, because they have to edit it. Oh, you lost my head there. I sit down. They have to edit it. So, sorry, run the question by me again. I forgot.
Oh, just about whether you would use bullet points or whether you'd use a table. Yes.
Sometimes tables get filtered out by applicant tracking software. Depends. I've sat in front of recruiters when I had a table and the copy they had was blank in that section. So sometimes it gets fiddled with by their system and it disappears. So it's best to...
So not tables, okay.
Yeah. So you can still format it in a way where it's sort of nice and tidy, but if you go directly to somebody, it's going to be that, make it the most presentable format. It could be tables. Also in Europe, for example, that everyone puts a photograph on their resume. I like the idea of it, but if you're going through a normal system, the preference is to leave it out. I know in US, for example, they can't even look at your resume if it's got a photograph. They just put it straight in the bin.
If it has one, or if it doesn't
have one, yeah, sometimes because of discrimination regulations and all that sort of stuff.
Oh.
It seems a bit strange, but in Europe, everyone has one. It's just a standard.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. I like them, but it is unusual in Australia, isn't it?
I like them too, especially if you've got a decent smile. And also, think about the average geek who's is in IT or in accounting, right? A photograph allows you to see a little bit of personality.
I think so.
Yeah, and also, because they're not always great communicators, if you dress well, you can sort of break that, stereotype, I guess. It's probably more in IT, but accountants very conservative as well, right?
Yeah.
So
just a question from Hui. Does it matter if we submit the resume in PDF or in a Word format?
It's best in Word.
Really?
Yes, because especially if it's going to a recruiter.
Oh yeah, for a recruiter. But if you're going directly to the company.
Yeah, because they have to cut out your address and your email and stuff, right?
Yeah.
The reality is, yes, they have the software to do all that, right? They can do it, but don't make them take that extra step, because they can just quickly, put a cover page, delete your contact details, because they don't want.
I thought it's more professional as a PDF.
Yeah, so you often see in jobs that actually ask specifically for Word too. Often they will. They'll ask specifically for Word, but they can more easily edit it, that's all. And they have to edit it if it goes through a recruiter often, because they have to delete it.
Just a couple of questions about the automated software. Software. So Fiona wants to know, is it common for automated software to be used to read and select the applications? And that's, it is, I think you can pretty much guarantee it's going to be done by software, yeah?
Not always. A lot of recruiters don't use it. I mean, especially the smaller ones. But the reality is, think about it this way, right? It's a little bit like Google. It's a search engine, right? What does Google try to do? What does it try to improve? It tries to duplicate what's the best way of searching. It's trying to duplicate a smart human, just, who's very fast. What are they really looking for? Applicant tracking software they try to improve it. Now, it might not be as fast as Google, but the early applicant tracking software was probably very bad. I remember a guy who did the early version of LinkedIn applicant tracking, and he would say, not even send it in Word, send it in rich text file and do all this. But it was a bit outdated, I thought, and it wasn't strictly the reality. They try to improve it, but what it's trying to do is trying to duplicate a human. So a writer for a human, yes. Yeah. What I would do is, if you have a title, which is, let's say, commercial analyst, and you're applying for a role called financial analyst, in many ways, they're the same role, right? So if you put it in the heading, if you worry about getting through the applicant tracking there, put commercial analyst, / financial analyst. So there's no it's not the same thing. It's the same. Often it's the same thing. Business analyst, FP&A analyst, commercial analyst, often the same thing. Perhaps in IT, they use business analyst a little bit more, but often they're the same thing. So that you can mitigate against that by doing things like that. And that's acceptable.
Maybe we could, just moving back where we were talking about when you get into the interview and you were saying, you started talking about how to showcase your technical ability. Because I think that's something that we often as financial modelers really struggle with, is showing what our ability is. Like, how do you get that across in an interview?
Okay. So what I might do is get you ask that second question now while I show you. So the second question is, I want to know people's level of Excel too. It's quite a long one. Yeah. Maybe it's but you can tick more than one on this one. So that can be probably done pretty quickly. So what I'll do is I'll also explain how do you do that. All right. I'll draw it up because it's easier. Okay.
So this was the one about the level of Excel.
Yeah, level Excel. I just want to know people's level, so we make it cater for them.
Yeah, so you can do. You don't have to just choose one. There's like a whole ton of them there.
Choose a whole group. Yeah, because I think.
Choose which ones you think.
Yeah, you can scroll down. I actually made a whole long list. Might be a bit too long, but at the bottom,
just scroll down. Yeah, I can see people are answering it. Great.
Okay, good. All right, so here's the thing. There's technical ability. One thing you can do is you can show them a model. Now, on occasion, I've been asked to bring in a model to demonstrate that, especially when they want you to hit the ground running or there's some complexity in the work that they do. It is actually literally financial modeling. So make sure I don't stand too high.
Lost your head again.
I'll actually move this camera up so I can stand up.
Yeah. Oh, that's good.
Okay. All right.
He's got a remote control for his camera. Love it.
Yes.
You just wanted to show us that, didn't you?
Well, I look taller now too.
Yeah.
So I would, even if they don't ask for it, bring in some work.
Yeah, just what on a USB or in a maybe bring in a little laptop or something.
I actually have a laptop. Another thing what I do is I show a little bit more expertise. I actually have a separate monitor, which I can mirror at the USB cable with a monitor.
Cool.
I helped some guy out on getting his job. He got made redundant and he actually bought me one as a present.
Right. But I mean, you don't have to go buy one specifically, but I think
it helps the show. Yeah. I mean, it was just that level. Everyone loved it. You can bring, look, thing is they don't bring their laptop in. So I would bring a laptop in.
Yeah.
Even if they don't ask for it, bring it in to show it to them.
And make sure it's like there, like ready to go. You don't want to be sitting in the interview fiddling about trying to find the file. Like have it like on.
Have it open.
Fired up, ready to go.
Yeah, even store it out in the directory so you can even quickly open it if they ask for a specific question. But what I found, like in the last one that I did.
Okay, I'm going to share thoughts.
Yeah, bring a spreadsheet, show that. Okay, great. Ooh. So
most people say they're pretty good with graphs and pivot tables.
Okay, good.
A few people not really, but yeah.
So 7% actually said financial modeling for Excel for dummies with dummies, Daniel. Okay, so very few Excel versions. Okay, good. So bring in a spreadsheet, especially if you've got some expertise. Here's the thing, the person that you interview with may not be an expert, right? What happens is they can, if they're not, they can fairly easily be impressed by you as well, that you can do certain things. Like I've had chats, like work with a CFO and he, years later, he said, oh, I've seen you do things with spreadsheets I've never seen before. Right? And I didn't think it was that complex what I did for him. But these guys, they know finance and they know models and stuff, but they don't necessarily build them. So if you can bring in some stuff, people who haven't done it themselves can be easily impressed. People who have done it need to know you meet a minimum requirement. Okay, so I would bring it in whether they ask for it or not. The other thing is, and it depends on what level, right? What impresses, well, let's talk about the technical side first. So I would tell a story about a time when I created something. Okay, so what happens with the story? So if I say I can do it, we don't know if you can or not. If I tell a story which says I was asked to, improve this or build something, build this report or build this model, right? and then you tell them the stages and the things that you learned or you mitigated against, right? They probably have familiarity about that, okay? If that either they've done it themselves or they've had other people do it. So what that does, it demonstrates that you've done it before, right? If they can follow that process, okay, you know, let's say you've got a report, but always with reports, there's going to be some problems like people don't accept it, or people question numbers, or people look at the accuracy, or the speed is not right. If you can still tell stories about how you handled that, right, it really demonstrates experience. So, you know, what happens when people don't let, you know, you don't even have to wait for them to ask. You just tell it in part of your story. So, you know, obviously with any new report, you're going to have a number of people who are familiar with the old way and got this new way. So the key thing I find is when you do that, as I'm creating the report, because I've done quite a few of these, I'm just pretending I'm saying it like I'm in an interview, is you got to get to them before you produce the final answer. You show them what they had before and show them how you're going to provide the same thing. And really have that meeting and sort of get them to agree with it. So when you present the final thing, they sort of already agreed with it. So they can't really attack it. So the key thing with a lot of new reports is they get often hammered when you finally present it, okay? But if you mitigate against that by actually talking with the people that you know might be uncomfortable with it, right? You usually find it's not really the technical side of the reporting, it's just how they're familiar with it, you know, and you might do some changes to make them feel comfortable. But I find that when I do these reports now, generally it's accepted. They might tweak a few things, but what happens is that meeting where I present it is more of a discussion rather than an attack or debate about.
So is that an example of?
That's an example of how I would answer. Yeah, how I might answer. So I'm telling a story.
Say in the interview?
Sorry. Yeah, I would say that in the interview.
That's what you'd say.
Yeah. So instead of waiting for them to initiate, you know, or what about when people object to it? You almost build it in like, oh, you know, like it happens all the time. This is how I handle it. It's almost like telling the story of.
So tell them even if they haven't asked.
Even if they haven't asked. So what I tend to do is I create what's called a 3-answer. So they ask a question, answer that question, and answer 2 other questions I didn't even ask for, but which flows from that.
Without rambling on too much.
Without rambling on too much, yeah, but it flows from that. Because what happens is other people answer the question and they feel, oh, I answered that question well, or didn't answer that question well. Yeah. But you answered questions I didn't even ask for. That shows even a higher level. They wouldn't even thought to ask. Yeah. So therefore you must be the expert. That guy is just okay, you see. Because what they're usually looking for, they're not usually looking for the guy who can just do the job. They're looking for the guy who's can do the job, but it's almost like halfway to the next level. So they can do it comfortably. And then they can improve on things rather than just do the job.
So how would you, so the technical skills, so is that those are your tips? So bring in your...
Yeah, so telling the story that gives the technical skills.
Spreadsheet, tell them a story. Any other tips?
The final tip is not so much just the technical side, because and I think you want to ask this is, how do you impress them beyond the, you know, how do you move to that next level?
Yeah.
So if I'm in the junior level, what people are looking for is people who are active and showing initiative. All right. So think about how do you show initiative? If I'm at the more senior level, what I'm looking for. So if I look at the CFOs compared to the financial controllers, let's say, or just the analysts, right? The CFO looks more strategically as a more of a big picture view. So when you get to that management level or senior level, what's more impressive is not so much that you show initiative and do stuff, it's more that you can see the big picture. You can almost like play the politics a little bit, but not so much think about it as politics, but how do I handle these other managers and what are the problems I get into and how do I I know if I present this is going to happen. So how do I mitigate against that? So it's the big picture I'm looking for. So at the more junior level, I want to see the person shows initiative, because that's a bigger frustration with the manager, right? The person could be talented, but he's not really doing that much, right? Because analyst is sort of a funny thing. You can do it quickly or you can do it slowly. But when you do it quickly, you know, you got more time. So what else can you add to my life without me having to ask you for it? So it's that actual extra communication piece and that keenness to do more is actually what's more valuable in a junior analyst. As long as you show your competency, technically, in the more senior level is really how do you handle other managers? How do you see the big picture? So as an example, I've done a lot of valuation work for companies, let's say, if the companies they want to buy. So from my experience is people like to push for if they like the idea of the deal, they try to influence the numbers to make sure we do the deal. You know, we might have to pay too much, but it's okay. It'll come back in the end, right? So if you show that you're aware of that and can work around it or model in such a way where we want to make sure we get the real number, right? You can't argue against it. But we don't make people angry about it. We don't make, because sometimes the deal is worth doing regardless of that. But what happens is they push the number, they push the analyst to make the number better. And that's quite common. Usually when they do this sort of stuff, they never do it. They never actually achieve the number that they projected, okay? And the problem with analysis work and being involved in this is nobody ever really checks it after. They just do the deal and the deal was done, but they never check if the deal was a good deal afterwards. So show the bigger picture is the answer to that. So I see you got another. Yeah, so let me know if you've ever been asked to demo. So my tip is though, even if they haven't asked, bring it because other people might not have brought it.
At least if it, and then you're prepared. If it's relevant, you can just whip it out.
That's right. That's right.
Cool.
Okay, so were there other questions? I think there's a Q&A. I see.
Yeah, there's a few technical questions about, what is financial modelling and stuff like that, but we're not going to cover that sort of thing in this session. There's lots of other sessions where we've talked.
Okay, cool. All right. So is there anything you want me to ask? Answer?
What financial modelling is. There's a couple of other questions. What about networking? What sort of?
Oh, okay. Networking. All right. So.
Sorry, I'm just gonna end the poll and I'm going to share the results so you can see the results. So most people have not had to demo their work, but they feel confident that they could. So that's interesting.
Good. Yeah, it's quite common, but I think I've only been asked twice really to demo that I could do something. And I think it's something they should do more of because, there's a lot of bad analysts actually. It's actually quite easy to hire someone who thinks they can do it, but can't do it. Would you agree, Daniel? People think they know better than they do. They think they're experts in Excel and can do a few formulas and do a pivot table. So networking, there's a lot of talk about, in this job coaching circle, a lot of people talk about, they should network their way to a job. My experience is you need to cover everything. So don't necessarily spend all your time networking. I actually coach people how to stand out. So out of 200 resumes, you can actually get to that top 20, which gets actually a call from the recruiter, and then you impress the recruiter, and then they forward your resume on, okay? So a lot of the success is actually some networking. Some is actually, if you've worked for somebody and they've been really impressed with you, keep in touch with them. Like I've gone out of my way to send them a book for Christmas. And then what happens is a few months later, they gave me a call, offer me a potential job, right? So that's one, keep in touch with people, especially if they've been somewhat impressed with what you've done, keep in touch with them because they'll remember you.
Yeah, so just, I wouldn't say, certainly at the moment, we really can't network, but just keeping in touch with people, I mean, that's really network, but I wouldn't spend all my energy on it. Is that what you're saying? Yeah,
so I think a lot of people sort of focus on too much. So some areas, like in sales, you probably is going to be more successful. But when something's technical, we don't really know if you're good at it or not. And it's quite hard to match some of the technical things that sometimes that people require. But there is, you see, when you apply online, once there's a vacancy, there's a low chance, right? 1 out of 200 something. I can show people how to improve that with their resume and the way they answer things. But if you go direct to a company, what you find is on average, on the company website, 1 out of 34 applications result in a job, right? Because companies don't often want to, when you go to a recruiter, it's expensive. I think it's good, but it's expensive. They pay 15% roughly commission on your salary. So if it's 100,000, they have to pay 15,000, and it can take a while too. If you go direct to the company website, they don't have to pay that. And often you'll get slightly higher quality candidates too, on average. If you go to a company, even if they don't have a job, right? Let's say in that company, there's 4 roles you can do, maybe a couple of management accountants, an analyst, and something else. There's 4 different roles you could do. If you go to a company, even if they don't have a role, and just keep in touch with them, maybe send them an email. I just want to touch base again. I've updated my resume, right? What they'll do is HR usually will keep something on file. And if you just remind them now and then, an average stay is about 2 years. A person stays in a job about 2 years. If there's 4 roles, it means on average 6 months, every 6 months, a new role will turn up, a vacancy that you could do. Now, if you've been on their database, they've got the file and you reminded them, it's very easy for them to call you first and interview you first, rather than go through the time of going on their website, then going to a recruiter. That could be months before that results in a role.
And
like
we got a good question from Henry. Is there any difference in the approach between staff roles and contract roles? I mean, obviously the turnover is higher. Is there any other sort of difference in how you should approach the job seeking process?
Yeah, contract roles tend to be a lot more technical. Like they want you to hit the ground running. So they want to focus on some technical things. But in the analyst, that's in the financial modeling area. The analyst area is not so much, as long as you can demonstrate experience and an ability to learn things quickly. Having a little bit of broader experience will help as well, because you've worked in a few different areas, so you can adjust fairly quickly. So I would say the permanent staff, they will want to know the fit a little bit more, the cultural fit. Do you really want to work for us, to work for this industry? Whereas the temp or the contract stuff is a little bit more, can you do the role? And will people like you? Can you learn it?
Yeah, quickly? They want to know, can you hit the ground running, and can you just get the job done?
Get the job done. And a lot of those roles will turn permanent as well. Like I've had 6-week roles turn into a few years for those things. As long as you show that some of that initiative and activity and the big picture perspective, that will actually help. Any more? So I'm just aware of time, got 10 minutes left. Any other Q&A questions? Maybe the next poll, what role are people aiming for, is probably a good one.
Sorry, I've done the other one. The thing that would stop you getting into a more.
Oh, that's good. Yeah, that's good. We thought about that too. Yeah. So yeah, what do you feel like stopping you getting to that next role? Any other questions, Daniel? So we're at the time.
Yeah, there are. But we're going to. I'll continue with some of the. I'll choose out some of the questions. We're going to have we are running a bit short of time, but we'll certainly be covering them in the face-to-face session, which will happen at 7 o'clock. So any questions that we don't get to, we can certainly cover that, and you'll be able to interact a bit more easily with Dick. There is a question from Shaf, if you have a disability or something that is a little bit different about yourself. So like if you had, if you only wanted to work part-time for whatever reason, or if there's, you can totally do the job, but you have a disability or illness or something like that. At what point should you share that?
Look, I think you share it at the interview, or if you're talking to the recruiter, you should share it with the recruiter. The key thing about the recruiter is you want them on your side, because they will keep your mind, right? So once you impress your recruiter and you represent them well, do the right thing, right? Do the ethical thing as well. Make sure you communicate through the recruiter rather than direct, or ask permission if you need to. But if the recruiter likes you and thinks you're a good, represent them well and a good candidate, then that will sort of bat for you. So if I go for a recruitment cycle, yes, I can get 200 something applications, but I might keep a few that I know on the side. But these are the guys I know. I've interviewed them myself. I know they're impressed in interviews. I will even call them first as I'm advertising and then put them through. Because recruiters are competing with other recruiters. Often there's a panel. So if there's a panel of 3, I'd rather get my resumes in first. So keep them on, keep your recruiters on side. They'll put you through first. They'll give you a call and says, "Oh, we've got this role. You'll be interested." You say yes. Do you want me to tweak my resume a little bit? And they say yes. Make sure you do it quickly. Send it through, and then they'll just.
So you're saying that when that you should share any information like that straight away in the first interview?
I would share it so the recruiter can actually sell you for you. I would do it in the interview as well. It can be an advantage, right? Sometimes a lot of roles, they don't really need a full-time person. They get a person, like in the last role, it was really an emergency. They hired me. They actually hired me the next day. Right? They had an emergency to do certain things, but then it was talking about this other stuff. But I just felt like that other stuff was just to make me feel like I should take the role because it'll be longer term or there'll be more use of my time after this project. But I ended up just doing 3 days a week in there after a little bit, right? I just talked to them and negotiated, but that wasn't my objective at the start, right? So if you're actually looking for that, it could be an advantage, but I wouldn't hide it too much because, you could always just start and then impress them and then see if you can negotiate. But I would.
It's risky, isn't it? Not being upfront. Yeah.
But be willing to work full time if you're going to do that, rather than you want to act with a degree of integrity, but on the other hand, you want to be able to sell. You want to sell first and then negotiate afterward too, to some degree.
And on that point, it's actually really interesting. The results of that last poll, people said that was the thing that would stop them from getting into a more senior role is their communications and their selling themselves skills. And I think that's really common. Just being able to sell yourself, I think, is probably the thing that's the most important.
Yeah. And this is common in finance and things like IT, where it's not necessarily we do it every day. We're not salespeople. We don't go and talk to a bunch of people all the time, selling them things. I sort of learned to do it because I got interested. As you know, I've done a lot of public speaking, and you can do things like public speaking to help you because you can speak in public. You can probably confront a one-on-one conversation. But what I find is you've got to think strategically. Put yourself in the other person's shoes as much as you can. I actually tell people sometimes you just got to go to the interview and let them sell you, even if you're not sure about the role yet. Just see. Because even then you just get the practice of it. Because what happens is I can teach you all these techniques, but until you actually turn up and stuff it up a couple of times, you won't be comfortable with it. But what happens is you learn to think like the other person, and don't sort of buy the idea it's something you couldn't control. So work out how you can get around certain questions. Always think strategically. And what happens is fairly quickly, you actually can communicate. I also would coach people who don't normally dress well to dress better. I almost, that candidate I said who I hired after she impressed me with the resume and the interview, she almost didn't take the role because I had to walk across the street and it was raining and my hair got wet. And she said, told me later she didn't almost take the role because my hair was messy. Right? So I didn't impress her. So try to dress in a way which, like I wear a pocket square, dress to expectation and a little bit more, because the automatic assumption is you must be good with people to dress like that. It seems strange, but actually it is. It is just sort of the first impression. You must be good with people to dress like that. So I tend to wear, I wear a darker suit when I interview, so it's a better impression, but I would do something like this. I wear a nice tie. I make sure I'm well groomed. And so you practice things like that. Practice that first impression, practice communicating, practice answering questions, tough questions, and telling stories with your answers. Okay, so I think 4 minutes left. What's this final poll?
Yeah, probably just just about the roles, maybe just
Ah, okay.
really quickly, because we just did a poll on the kind of roles that people
Okay.
search, or the sort of search they're
I
searching
see that.
for.
Yeah. Financial modeler.
Most people are looking for financial modeler or consultant.
Mm.
But yeah, I mean, is there some sort of, analyst is a fairly sort of
Analyst.
generic kind of term. It could mean anything really. Do you have any advice about titles or anything you should
Um,
do or not do?
Look, I think what I mentioned is, finance analyst, commercial analyst, business analyst, FP&A analyst tend to fall in that same bucket.
Mm.
What I would do, I would have almost two resumes, one for if you can do both, and often they can do both, one for an analyst and one for modeler. I would actually, because what happens is you just move points around, maybe focus on different things, but have those two resumes. Because you have a generic one, especially if you want to become a financial modeler, an analyst isn't always a good financial modeler because they actually do slightly different things. Financial modeler is going to be a lot more technical with Excel than an analyst. So I would have a financial modeling resume. The market can vary, so you might not always find that financial modeling role. So you might go to an analyst, but a lot of analyst roles, especially the senior ones, will actually do modeling too. So modeling is second, but analyst is first. And some other areas, modeling is first, analyst is second. So one of the later roles I did, it was a fancy title, sort of, I can't remember what the title was. It had like 8 words in it. Business analytics, financial reporting, senior manager, all this in the title. If I look at it, it was probably 50% modeling and 50% analysis and managing other analysts.
Yeah,
So,
there's quite a difference, I think, between modeling and analysis, and just make sure that you're really clear on the definitions of the role, I think is important.
yeah. And a
So
lot of roles are 50-50 too. And I think it's with the 50-50, you want to demonstrate a big picture view, but a lot of technical skills. So doing a course like Daniel's course for the modeling is actually quite useful.
of course.
Yeah, definitely. You can learn a lot. A lot of it is just, you might not remember everything, but you know that something can be done. I think that's one of the keys of financial modeling. People don't know what can be done with it. So therefore they don't know.
Yeah, and Google is a fantastic, if you get into a tight spot, you
Uh-huh.
can always Google it.
Yeah, I still Google stuff, because I mean, I got really basic stuff. I can't remember where certain buttons are we use all the time,
But it can be done.
I know I found it before, and I just go through the same sequence of searching, but I don't try to remember it. I think you can only remember so much. So I keep looking, like 6 times a day I go for this button. I can't remember where it is naturally. So I keep going through the toolbars looking for it. It's just silly, but nobody's got a problem with that. Okay, so are you sharing that screen, Daniel?
I have just shared my screen. You should be able to see my PowerPoint. Can you see my PowerPoint?
I can see it on my other screen. Yeah, so that's
yeah, good. Just with some of the sessions, we've got an amazing lineup coming up for you. So these are some of the sessions that we've got coming up, and I can see Susan has just shared the link for the after party. So be sure that you grab a copy of that link, because that is going to disappear as soon as we go. So I would love to see you there. Nick has just shared some links as well.
I've just shared a few links. I created a few job
I'll
groups.
email that as well. Thank you.
Yeah, so a couple of job groups, Facebook, LinkedIn, career groups. I put my website on there, and also I'm creating a LinkedIn channel too. Inspired by you.
You've got a YouTube.
Yes. Oh, sorry, YouTube channel. Sorry.
Yeah, I know what you meant.
Created that.
Yeah, cool. All right, fantastic. Well, thank you so much, Dick. That was really useful, and I will see you on the other side, and we'll send out a copy of, so everybody who registered for the webinar, although the Zoom link, I will send out a copy of the of all of those files and those links to you as well. So thanks very much, Dick, and we'll see you in the private after party face-to-face Zoom call. I'll see you there in a minute.
All right, cool. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.